Konnichiwa. Today we're going to continue with the narrative lessons that we started last week. And this time I think we're going to be able to proceed a little faster. So let's refresh our minds on the story we've read so far. Follow me. Alice wa kawa no soba ni ita. One day, Alice was by the river. O-nei-chan wa tsumaranai hon wo yonde ite. Asondi kurenakanta. Big sister was reading a boring book and did not play. Granes. Omoshiroi koto ga nai. Ta Alice wa itta. Omoshiroi means interesting or amusing. Koto means a thing. And in Japanese we have two common words with thing. And they are mono and koto. Now, a mono is a thing in the most usual sense, a physical thing. A hat, a book, a pair of glasses, non-fuji. Koto is a more abstract kind of thing. An affair, a matter, a circumstance. So, when we say, is there anything in that box, we mean mono. And when we say the thing is, we usually mean koto. So, omoshiroi koto ga nai means there's nothing interesting going on here. No interesting circumstance. Ita, here, means say. And you can see it's like a mouth with sound waves coming out of it. But the important thing to notice here is that little particle to. There are actually two to particles. One means and it's very simple. The other one is what we call the quotation particle, and that's what we're dealing with here. When we quote someone as saying something, or even as thinking something, we use this particle to. It's kind of like a quotation mark that you can hear. As you see, we use the square quotation marks in Japanese, which are the equivalent to English quotation marks, but we also use the to. So we don't just say, nothing interesting is happening, and it's said. We say nothing interesting is happening to, and it's said. Now, to is a very interesting particle structurally, and we're going to look into that a little more deeply in a few minutes. その時、白いウサギが通り過ぎた。その時、その means that, and toki means time. So we're literally saying that time. That is a bit more like saying just then, at that moment, at that time. So we use it just the way we use other relative time expressions. We don't need to put ni or anything else with it, we just state the time and then continue with what was happening at that time. In this particular sentence, the point of sonotoki is that just at that moment, when Alice had been saying that there was nothing interesting happening, just at that time, this happened. Sonotoki, shiroi usagi ga tori sugita. Shiroi means white, it's an adjective. Usagi means rabbit. And tori sugiru is made up of two words, and it's doing something that we are going to see over and over and over again in Japanese. It's using the I stem of one verb to attach another verb to give it extra meaning. So, toru means to pass through, and sugiru means to exceed or go beyond. So, tori sugiru connects those two words together. Toru, pass through, sugiru, go beyond, and it means passing by. A white rabbit passed by. その時、白いウサギ white rabbit 通り過ぎた passed by. 普通のウサギではなくて。Now, 普通 means ordinary, and the rest of this you already know. ではない means it isn't, it wasn't. And we're putting it into the te form because this is part of a complex sentence. And we looked at complex sentences last week, didn't we? So, 普通のウサギではなくて。It was not an ordinary rabbit. チョッキを着ているウサギだった。チョッキ means a vest. 着る means wear. So kite eru means to be wearing, to be in the act of wearing. And that, of course, is the past tense of the copula. So, it was not an ordinary rabbit. It was wearing a vest rabbit. It was a rabbit that was wearing a vest. うさぎは懐中時計を Well, there. 懐中時計 is not a word we're going to encounter all that often because there aren't many of them around these days. But it is an example of something we are going to see an awful lot, which is that in Japanese, as you know, we can modify one noun with another by marking the first one with no for na, which is a form of da. But we can also, when we're not just modifying one noun with another, but forming a new noun, we can simply ram them together. We don't have to modify them in any way. The way we do with verbs, we turn them into the a stem, but you can't do that with nouns. Nouns don't have any stems, they don't modify in any way. So when you're putting two nouns together to make a new noun, you simply push them into each other. Is this the same as what we do in English with words like seaweed or bookshelf? You just push two nouns together to make a new noun. So the parts of this noun, kaichu joke, kaichu is a slightly unusual noun. It means in one's pocket or the inside of one's pocket. And toke is a very common word. It means clock or watch. You have the same word for a clock in Japanese, whether it's a small one or a big one. So kaichu doke is a pocket watch. And the reason that we say doke instead of toke is what Alice in Kanji Land calls ten hooking. And this is that when you push two nouns together in the way that we're doing here, and the second one begins with a sharp sound like t, or chi, we turn it into its equivalent dull sound like d or b. And of course in Japanese you do this by adding those two small marks to the kana. So to becomes do, cha becomes da, k becomes the, sa becomes the za, etc. So for example, ao is blue, as you know, sora is sky, and when you put them together, yes, not ao sora, but ao zora. We put a ten on for that sharp word, and Alice calls that ten hooking. It's as if those two little points, those two little claws, hook into the word before it to turn them into a single word. It's a thing you're going to see very often. And just in English, you can't do this with any two nouns, but there are a lot of nouns that are made up of two nouns, and so long as one of the nouns isn't a slightly unusual one, like kaichu, they're very easy to understand, just as they are in English. And then we have nasoi, osoi, to, ita. Now, we're going to look at what this to actually does, and as we get into more complex sentences, three-level compound sentences like this one, we start to see how useful it becomes. What to actually does structurally is that it takes whatever it marks, and that could be two words like this, or it could be a whole paragraph with all kinds of other grammar going on in it. It takes whatever it marks as a quotation and turns it effectively into a single noun. So a tall carriage is a white noun carriage marked with to. And we're going to find as we go on that this is used not only to mark things people say and things people think, but all kinds of other things. And we'll have an example of that a little later in this lesson. But this to structure is essentially making a quasi-noun out of whatever is marked with to, and a to then makes it function as a modifier to the verb that follows. When it's a simple quotation like that, the verb is going to be ir, to say. It could also be kangaeru, to think, or omo, to think or feel. But it can be many other things too, as you're going to see in a moment. So this is the structure of a to-marked statement of any kind. Osoi, to, ita, hausiri dashita. Posoi means late. And in order to make it a sentence, obviously we have to have a zero pronoun here. So the rabbit is either saying it's late or I'm late. In the Disney version, of course, it was I'm late. Kosoi. I'm late. We don't need to say to with sagiwa ite this time because we've got the sagiwa at the beginning of the sentence, and this is a compound sentence. So the second half of the compound sentence has the same main carriage, the same subject as the first half. Osoi to ite. The rabbit said, I'm late. And that ite is another compound. Ite. So this time we have a 3-deep compound sentence. The rabbit looked at his watch. He said, osoi. And then he did something else. Hashiri dashta. Hashiru means run. And dasu literally means to take out. But this is a combination we're going to see very often in Japanese. Once again, we're using that I stem, which is the main connecting stem, to connect hashiri to dasu. And what does it mean here? Well, dasu, when it's connected to a verb, means that the action of the verb erupted. So we can say that someone nakidashita. Naku is cry, and we connect the I stem of naku to dasu, and nakidasu means burst out crying. We can say warai dashita. Warao is laugh, and if we connect the I stem of warao to dasu, we are saying burst out laughing. And in this case, what happened? The rabbit suddenly burst out running. It broke into a run. Tokusaki wa kaiju toke wo mite osoi to ite hashirirashita. The rabbit looked at its pocket watch. It cried, I'm late, and it broke into running. Chotto matte, kudasai, to Arisu wa yonda. Chotto matte, kudasai is a phrase you're going to hear a lot in Japanese. Sometimes the kudasai will get left off. What does it mean? Chotto means a little. Matte is the te form of matsu, which means to wait. And kudasai means please. It's actually connected with kuraru, which we talked about last time. It also refers to giving down. It's please give down to me. Please lower down to my level. So that's a polite way of saying please give. But it's not just giving a thing, just as with kureru and ageru. It's not just giving a thing. It can also be, if you connect it to the te form of a verb, giving the action of that verb. So you can see it very related to that kureru and ageru that we learned last week. Chotto matte kudasai. Now, because this is so common, very often when we put a verb into te form and address it to someone, it's kind of short for te kudasai. Chotto matte kudasai means please wait a little. So she's asking the rabbit to stop. She wants to meet with the rabbit. Chotto matte kudasai to arisu wa yonda. So we've got the to particle again, the quotation particle, which we need when we quote anything. And then yonda. Yonda, what does that mean? Well, we've come across yonda before, I think, haven't we? And it means read in the past. That is the ta form, the da form in this case, of yomu. But in this case, it's different. It's the da form of yobu. If you remember from our te and ta form lesson, the nibumu group of verbs, nu, bu, and mu, ending verbs, all form their te form with nde and their ta form with nda. So both yomu and yobu have the past form yonda. Fortunately, we're not very often likely to get reading and calling mixed up, are we? This yobu means to call, to shout out. It can call in any of the senses that call is used in English. You can call someone a name, You can call an apple a lemon, but you'd be wrong. Or you can call out, ちょっと待ってくださいとアリスは呼んだ. Please wait a minute, called Alice. でも、ウサギはぴょんぴょんと走り続けた. Demo means but. 走る means run. And we're going to leave out pion pion for just a moment here. 続ける means to continue. So again, we've got this form of taking the I stem of a verb, 走る becomes 走り, and then we add on to it the verb 続ける to continue. So, ウサギは走り続けた means the rabbit continued running. Pion pion. There's something we're going to find very often in Japanese, and that is a doubled word which is a sound effect. There are lots and lots of these in Japanese. Shiku shiku, which is the sound effect for crying. And some of them will be literal sounds, and some of them describe states of various kinds. So we're going to be meeting a lot of these later. Pion pion is almost a literal sound effect. It's the sound of a small thing jumping along. And you'll hear this an awful lot. I do at any rate, but then a lot of my friends are small things that jump along. So pion pion is the sound, or not quite a sound. It's, if it were an anime, you'd probably hear the sound, wouldn't you? Pum, 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 pum. But in this case, it's not necessarily a sound you hear, but it's the feeling, the sound-like feeling of a small thing, small animal, jumping, little jumps. So, because it's a rabbit, it didn't run the way you run, it runs in a little jumping, bouncing fashion, the way rabbits do. And the thing to note here is that we say pion pion to. So once again, we're using that quotation particle. In this case, we're using it to show how the rabbit ran, because this is kind of technically a sound effect. We're quoting the sound the rabbit made in order to tell the manner in which the rabbit ran. It ran in a little jumps kind of manner. All right, so next week we'll find out what happened, what you think Alice might have done. No looking ahead. So, as you see, we're getting better, aren't we? It took us an awful long time to get through 2 sentences last week. This week, you got through a lot more quickly, and I think we've learned a lot again. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below, and I will answer. I'd like to thank my Gold Kakashi patrons, my producer angels who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon, and all my supporters everywhere, and I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします. Class dismissed.